In this demonstration, we'll look at various methods to harden a managed switch. In this case, we're using our Cisco Small Business Managed Switch and are logged into the management interface using Internet Explorer. We're authenticated as the admin user so we can make changes. In this demonstration, we'll look at port security, management access, and access control using access control lists, ACLs. To begin, let's look at port security. When hardening a switch, one of the first things we want to do is shut down any unused ports. Click on Configure Port Settings, which will take us directly to the port settings page under Port Management. On this page, we can select one of the unused ports. You'll notice we have several ports here that are either down and unused or up and used. The ones that are unused are currently down. We want to make sure they're administratively down, meaning they have to be turned on before they can be used. Let's take a look at port 2. It's down. Let's scroll to the bottom of the page and click Edit. On this page, you'll notice that the administrative status of this port is actually up, even though it's operationally down. This means there's nothing plugged into it. To make sure that this port remains down and is not used without permission, we'll set the administrative status as down. Click Apply, Close. To set all other unused ports as administratively down, we'll select port 2, then click Copy Settings. In the Copy Settings window, we can list all the ports that we want to be down. In this case, we'll type 3, 6, and 8 through 28. Go ahead and click Apply. All of those ports are now administratively down. Let's look at port 3 for confirmation. Select port 3 and click Edit. You'll notice on this page that the status is administratively down, so the status that we copied from port 2 went to the rest of the ports. Click Close. By setting the ports that we're not using to administratively down, those ports will come up at a down state each time the switch starts up. At the end, we'll make sure that we save our configuration file to the startup configuration. Next, we also want to enable port security. To do that, we'll open the Security tab and click on Port Security. Under this tab, we can configure locking mechanisms for each of these ports. We'll click on port 1 and select Edit. On this page, you'll notice that we can lock the port, meaning we're going to only allow certain MAC addresses to pass traffic through this port. A classic lock means that the first device you connect to that port will be remembered and allowed to pass traffic through this port. You can also select Limited Dynamic Lock, which gives you a variable number from 1 to 256. Let's change this to 4. Now, if you connect a hub to a specific port on the switch and connect 4 devices to that, you can allow all 4 of those devices to talk through that port. No additional devices would be allowed to pass traffic. We'll go ahead and select the classic lock. That will give us 1 device, and the device will be locked in. If you try to connect a device that is not supposed to be on that port, the action on violation determines what happens. The default is to discard the packet. If you connect any other device to the port, the traffic will be ignored. You can also forward the traffic, or you can shut down the port. That's a little drastic for our purposes. However, if you are extremely cautious about your security and you don't want anybody connecting a device you don't know about, being able to shut down the port is one of the most secure things that you can do. We'll go ahead and select Discard if it's a device that we aren't sure about. If somebody plugs in a device that's not locked in, you can also trap the MAC addresses of the offending device. We've enabled locking for port 1, as well as the classic lock. We're going to discard the frames of any other devices that come onto that port. We'll go ahead and click Apply, Close. Once again, we can take the settings that we've created for port 1 and apply them to the rest of the ports. Scroll down to the bottom and select Copy Settings. In this case, we'll select all of the ports, or 2 through 28, and click Apply. You'll see that the settings we've created for port security now apply to all 28 ports. The next piece that we would like to cover is Management Access. We'll go to Management Access method and click Access Profiles. In this case, the only profile that's on the machine is the console profile, which is the default. We're going to add a new access profile, so click Add. We'll call this access profile Management. In this management profile, the very first rule, or Rule 1, that we want to have will deny all management. We'll go ahead and select Deny and specify all different management methods and apply it to all interfaces. That will be our first and main rule. We'll go ahead and click Apply, Close. Now that we've created our management profile, we can select Profile Rules. It can seem a little confusing that you create a management profile, then add a rule to it. We'll go ahead and select our management profile and add another rule. It looks very similar to the page we just used. For rule number 2, we want to allow HTTP access. We want to select all interfaces, but we also only want to allow traffic from a specific workstation or IP address. We'll specify that 192.168.1.200 will be the only workstation allowed to access this port. We'll also input the network mask by typing 255.255.255.0. Alternatively, we can use the prefix length and use the prefix instead. We'll go ahead and click Apply, Close. We now have a management access rule that denies all traffic, and one access rule which allows us to access the HTTP interface from one specific workstation. But we're not done yet. We need to go back to Access Profiles and set the active profile. Right now, we don't have an active management profile. Go ahead and select Management. This denies all types of management interfaces with this switch, except for the HTTP access from the one workstation that we have selected. We're not going to click Apply this time. If we do, we'll probably be locked out of the switch, and we want to make sure that we have access to complete this demo. Let's go to the next section and look at firmware updates. Under Administration File Management, we can select Upgrade Backup Firmware. Part of hardening the device, or a computer of any kind, is to make sure you have the latest software and patches. You can browse to select the latest firmware and download it. In this particular switch, you have to select the active image once you've loaded the firmware. You can select image 1 or the new image, image 2, and apply it. Next, you'll need to reboot the switch. Once you do that, the switch will come back with the latest and greatest software and the best enhancements. This allows you to have the best possible security for this switch. Upgrading the firmware for the switch, as well as applying patches to any computer, is a key element to hardening the switch. The last aspect of hardening the switch is access control using the ACLs. Let's select Access Control. On this switch, we have various methods of access control. We can use a MAC-based ACL, we can use an IPv4-based ACL, and we can also use an IPv6-based ACL. We'll set up a MAC-based ACL. In this case, we don't have an access control list, so we'll go ahead and create one. We want to make sure that nobody can attach game consoles or connect any games to our switch. Type Games as the name of our ACL. Click Apply, Close. We have the ACL, but to put access control entries, ACE, into this access control list, we need to click the MAC-based ACE table. It has a slightly different interface, but let's click Add to add an entry to this page. For our first access control entry, entry 1, we're going to select Deny. We'll select any for the destination MAC address. Under Source MAC address, we're going to select User Defined and put in the address one of the game consoles or the prefix of the MAC address, which is used for all devices of the same manufacturer. We'll go ahead and enter 00041F followed by 6 ones. Under Source MAC Wildcard Mask, we'll enter 6 zeros followed by 6 ones. This says that we only care about the first 6 digits of the MAC address. This is preventing any device from the same manufacturer from being connected. We'll go ahead and click Apply. That creates our first entry into the Access Control List entry table. We'll add one more just for demonstration purposes. We'll go ahead and create Priority 2. Once again, we're going to select Deny and specify the destination MAC address as Any. We're going to specify the source MAC address value as 005042 followed by 6 ones. We'll do the same Source MAC Wildcard Mask, or 6 zeros followed by 6 ones. Click Apply, Close to create our access control entries. We could add more for any of the game console types that are out there or any other device that we want to prohibit from using our network. We can also add anything we want to allow on the network. Now that we've created the MAC-based ACL table and have created the entries in that table, we need to make sure that the ports have a binding to that table. We'll go ahead and click on ACL Binding. Select port 1, scroll down, and click Edit. We want to apply this MAC-based ACL, so we'll select that and then select Games, which we just created. If there were additional ones, we could choose from them as well. We'll go ahead and click Apply, Close. Just as we've done in the previous portions of this demonstration, we'll select port 1, the GE1 interface, and click on Copy Settings. We'll enter 2 through 28 and click Apply. That gave us a successful binding of the game's ACL to all of the ports in our interface. One final thing that you will always want to do when you've made configuration changes to your switch is to save the running configuration to the startup configuration. On this switch, simply click Save at the top. It will blink when there have been changes. Select Running Configuration as the source file name and set the destination file name as Startup Configuration. Then click Apply. In this demonstration, we've examined the idea of port security. We've looked at management access to our switch, and we've also looked at restricting certain traffic to the switch using ACLs.